Boeing says is operating in what it considers the most complex environment it's seen since World War II, from record demand for commercial jets and defense platforms to strains in the supply chain.
Boeing makes airplanes. They had a big problem with one, but they make the greatest airplanes. They make the best airplanes in the world. They had the problem with one.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
Boeing just dropped a bombshell, and the aftershocks are already rattling Wall Street, Washington, and every airport in between. In 2025, America's most iconic aerospace giant made the unthinkable move, shutting down key U.S. production lines and shifting major assembly to Mexico. The reason? Cost-cutting after years of scandals, safety failures, and financial bleeding. But here's the twist. President Trump isn't taking it quietly. He's threatening a 200% tariff on any aircraft not built in America. That's not just a warning shot. It's an economic missile aimed straight at Boeing's balance sheet. This isn't just about one company. It's about national loyalty, global capitalism, and the future of America's industrial backbone. If Boeing can walk away, what's stopping others? And how far will Trump go to stop them? Stick with us, hit like, subscribe, and keep watching, because this story is only just beginning. Boeing's announcement didn't come quietly. It came like a thunderclap. For decades, this company wasn't just another manufacturer. It was America's pride, the crown jewel of aviation, the name stamped on the wings that carried presidents, soldiers, and millions of travelers across the globe. And yet in 2025, Boeing made the stunning call, cutting U.S. production and shifting large chunks of its assembly line to Mexico. The official reasoning? Rising costs, shrinking margins, and a need to compete globally. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Boeing had been reeling from scandal after scandal. The 737 MAX crashes destroyed public trust. The 2024 mid-flight door panel blowout reignited safety fears. And the Starliner program's repeated failures embarrassed America's space ambitions. Confidence in the company was in tatters, and investors were demanding answers. Enter Kelly Ortberg, Boeing's CEO. A man known for his steel nerves and corporate loyalty to shareholders above all else. Ortberg delivered the message bluntly. If Boeing wants to survive, it must cut costs, streamline, and diversify production, even if that means bypassing U.S. soil. It was a calculated gamble. Moving to Mexico slashes labor costs, gives access to trade corridors, and reduces supply chain headaches. From Ortberg's perspective, it was common sense. From Washington's perspective, it was treason. President Trump didn't hold back. Within hours of Boeing's announcement, he blasted the company on Truth Social and in a press conference, vowing to slap a 200% tariff on any aircraft not fully assembled in the United States. To Trump, this wasn't just economics. It was a matter of national pride. He framed Boeing's move as abandoning America in its hour of need, calling it a betrayal of workers in Wichita, Everett, and Charleston. And he made sure Boeing knew, either reverse course or face economic war. The White House escalated the rhetoric further, warning that federal contracts, including defense deals worth billions, were on the line. Think about it. Boeing isn't just selling planes to airlines. It's building jets for the Pentagon, helicopters for the Army, and spacecraft for NASA. Suddenly, the message from Washington was crystal clear. Play ball, or risk losing everything. But Ortberg wasn't backing down. Publicly, he doubled down on the Mexico plan. In his words, Boeing's loyalty wasn't to politicians, it was to global competitiveness. The company pointed to booming demand in South Asia and Latin America, where airlines were lining up for cheaper, fuel-efficient planes. Boeing boasted it had delivered 130 aircraft in those regions alone in the past year, boosting revenue by 18% to $20 billion. If the U.S. wanted to threaten tariffs, Ortberg's strategy was simple. Pivot harder toward emerging markets, and that's where the global dominoes started falling. China, already sparring with Washington over trade, hit back with its own 125% tariff on U.S. aircraft. That stranded billions in Boeing orders and gave Beijing's pet project, COMAC, an opening to dominate its home turf. Europe wasn't far behind. Ryanair, one of Boeing's biggest customers, publicly warned it might dump future Boeing orders in favor of Airbus or even COMAC. Overnight, what looked like a cost-cutting move snowballed into a full-blown global trade conflict, dragging Boeing into the center of the storm. Meanwhile, the fallout at home was brutal. In Wichita, workers whispered about layoffs. In Everett, Local businesses braced for the ripple effect as suppliers worried about contracts drying up. Thousands of jobs, billions in revenue, and decades of industrial infrastructure were suddenly on shaky ground. Trump may have promised tariffs to punish Boeing, but workers on the factory floor feared they would pay the price. And just as America braced for the showdown, the story took yet another turn. Because while Boeing fought with Trump in the open, other cracks in its foundation were about to be exposed. Cracks that made this corporate rebellion look less like bold strategy and more like desperation. Boeing's gamble might have looked bold on paper, but in reality, it was a dangerous high-wire act over a political firestorm. The company wasn't just shifting factories. It was daring Washington, daring Trump, and daring its customers to call its bluff. And when you push that far, the blowback comes hard. Ryanair's threat to walk away wasn't just a hollow warning. The airline had already opened talks with Airbus, signaling that loyalty to Boeing no longer came with guarantees. Airbus, smelling blood in the water, pounced on the opportunity, showcasing its A320neo as the safer, more reliable bet. Meanwhile, COMAC, the Chinese state-backed challenger, was quietly lining up orders across Asia, using Beijing's tariffs as leverage to squeeze Boeing further out of the world's fastest-growing markets. For the first time in decades, Boeing wasn't the one dictating terms. It was the one scrambling to hold on. Financially, the company painted a mixed picture. Yes, revenues spiked to $20 billion thanks to international sales. But behind the curtain, cash flow was negative, debt was mounting, and analysts began questioning whether Boeing was burning its future just to keep today's numbers afloat. The glossy press releases about global diversification didn't hide the reality. The company's US foundation was eroding. And once you lose that foundation, global dominance becomes a fragile illusion. Adding insult to injury, Boeing's credibility remained scarred. The world hadn't forgotten the 737 MAX disasters, the 2024 door panel incident that forced an emergency landing, or the repeated embarrassment of its Starliner program, failing to deliver astronauts reliably. These weren't minor bumps in the road. They were cracks in the brand's very identity. Trust, once shattered, doesn't come back with a few corporate press conferences. For airlines, safety is currency, and Boeing's currency was dangerously devalued. That's why Congress jumped into the fray. Lawmakers hauled Ortberg into hearings, grilling him on whether Boeing had abandoned its national duty. Senators thundered about taxpayer money funding a company now shipping jobs south of the border. The word treason may not have been used officially, but the tone left little doubt. That's how Washington viewed this corporate rebellion. Some floated legislation to restrict federal contracts to companies that kept manufacturing at home. Others warned about national security, pointing out that relying on a Mexico-based supply chain for critical defense components could leave America vulnerable. Ortberg, however, didn't blink. In public statements, he framed Boeing as the victim of outdated politics. He argued that the aviation industry had gone global decades ago, that competition from Airbus and COMAC required flexibility, and that tariffs were nothing more than self-inflicted wounds. His message was cold but calculated. Boeing would survive with or without Washington's blessing. But survival isn't the same as leadership. And as the dust settled, Boeing's future looked more uncertain than ever. If Trump pushed ahead with his 200% tariffs, Boeing's domestic sales could collapse overnight. If China kept its 125% retaliatory tariffs, one of the largest growth markets would remain sealed off. And if Europe pivoted toward Airbus, the balance of power in global aviation could tilt permanently away from America. That's the broader lesson in this saga. Boeing's crisis isn't just about one company. It's about the fragility of global capitalism itself. When corporations chase cost savings across borders, they gamble with national loyalty. When politicians weaponize tariffs, they risk shattering industries built over decades. And when trust in safety and reliability collapses, no amount of flashy revenue numbers can hide the cracks. The truth is simple. Boeing now stands at a crossroads. It can either repair its reputation, rebuild its US base, and restore trust, or it can keep chasing short-term gains abroad and risk fading into irrelevance. So here we are. Boeing has made its move, Trump has fired back, and the world is watching to see who blinks first. This isn't just another corporate headline. It's a defining moment for America's industrial future. Will Boeing stand its ground and risk alienating its home market? Or will Trump's tariffs and political pressure force the company back into line? The stakes are nothing less than the survival of America's aviation dominance, but this story goes beyond airplanes. It's about whether global corporations can still call themselves American when they ship jobs abroad. It's about whether political leaders can really rein in multinationals without sparking economic chaos. And it's about what happens when loyalty, profit, and power collide on the world stage. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. And stay tuned, because the Boeing saga is far from over.